Hello, 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 and welcome back. Welcome to our weekly Sunday school lesson. I am Elder Latanya Milliken of the All Nations Church in Oakland, California, and this is lesson 12 in our winter quarter. The date of our lesson is February the 20th, 2022. We are still in the book of St. John, the 19th chapter, highlighting today, let's see, the 16th through the 30th verse. The subject of our lesson today is crucifixion and death. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone this is Black History Month, and I want to give a shout out to a Black business owner who is has made my mother really happy. And his name is Harold Dacus. I want to put a title on it, but he said, just call me Harold. Someone that we have known almost like, well, he's a family friend, almost like a brother. And we, our parents worked together in ministry, and we kind of grew up together. He is a contractor, among other things. And my mom needed some work done on her house. And so she got 3 estimates. And so she finally decided to go with Harold. And she is so pleasantly pleased. I want to give you this shout out because she's so happy. I haven't seen her so happy in a while. And she's raving about how excited she is about her house, the new roof, the gutters, and the steps, all of these things. Thank you so much. And I think for me, watching you're always so positive, and not just the job you've done, but just the little things that you do. And you know, as I've got a new role with Chase, and so I'm managing the Oakland Community Center, and we are really helping to uplift the Black and the brown and the female-owned businesses. And watching your team, it's been a diverse team and just so pleasant. So I want to give a shout out to you, to recognize you. I'm going to also and to my audience, if you're in the Bay Area and you live in the Bay Area and you need some work done on your home or your rental property or what have you, I'm going to leave his email address in the comments. He's very, very good with seniors and with all ages, and always so positive. So thank you, and keep up the good work. So let's go to our Sunday school lesson. We are in the book of John again, and we're talking about the crucifixion. Okay, my watch is talking. All right. We're talking about the crucifixion and the death of Jesus. I want to give you, connect the dots for you, because we last week we were in the 18th chapter, and now we're sort of the mid 19th chapter. So I just kind of want to bridge that gap for you and then talk about some details around the crucifixion and death. Quite a few details. Now, this is shared in all 4 gospels. So if you want a clearer picture of what happened in the death and the resurrection of Jesus, you can read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Today we're going to highlight a bit of Matthew and a bit of John. And but let me just kind of bridge from last week to this week. Last week, Jesus was, of course, he was arrested. And week before last, he was arrested. Last week, he was being interrogated by Pilate, and Pilate was conflicted. Pilate wanted him. Felt like Pilate said he was not guilty. He couldn't find no fault in him. And so we mentioned last week how it was Passover, and the religious leaders and the Jews stood outside of the court, and they didn't want to go in because they didn't want to be defiled. They wanted to be able to eat Passover. And if you've gone into a Gentile's home, then you would have been determined unclean for the entire day and that night, and they wanted to have Passover. So Pilate had to go back and forth, back and forth. And so he presented his case to the Jews, and they says, no, we want to crucify him. And Pilate said, well, if you want to crucify him, do it yourself. And they says, well, no. He says he is the king of the Jews, and we want him crucified. He is calling himself a king. And so Pilate had Jesus flogged. He had him whipped. And so just a little detail about that. So when you were a criminal and you were guilty of a crime, then or you were going to be executed, they would flog you. And in the process of flogging, they would take your clothes off. You would be naked. They would tie you to a pole and they would whip you. And particularly in Jesus' case, he was whipped with iron tip. He had a leather whip with iron tips. And the Jewish custom was only up to 39 stripes. And so Jesus was whipped under the Jewish procedure, because under the Roman procedure, then they would just whip you until the soldier got tired. And so we see this interwoven of different laws and different procedures. And after they whipped Jesus, then they mocked him. They took the thorns and made a crown and put it on his head. They put some say purple, some say scarlet robe on him. And in my references, they were trying to mock a Roman prince. You know, a Roman prince would wear the little leaf crown and a purple cloak. And they found some old purple either robe, or some say it may have even been an old rug, and they gave him a stick, which was his scepter, and in the process they mocked him. When I say they mocked him, the soldiers administered the punishment or the flogging, and there were 4 soldiers, and they hit him with the staff. They spit on him, they slapped him, and then Pilate presented Jesus in that condition to the Jews to hopefully get them to change their mind or find some sympathy, and they not want to crucify him. And so Pilate presented him, and they say, here's your king, here's the king of the Jews. And they said, we want to, nope, crucify him. And when Pilate said, well, you crucify him, they says, no, he says he's a king, and that is treason. And the only king we have is Cesar, and we are, the only king. Anyone who declares himself a king is a rebel against Cesar. And so Pilate considered that, because if he would allow Jesus to go free and he was guilty of treason, then Pilate would have been accused of treason as well. And so this is where our lesson, I know a lot of details. This is where our lesson picks up. And the 19th chapter of St. John, the 16th verse, we'll read a little bit. If you have your favorite translation, just follow along. So after all this, after the flogging and the scourging and the mocking, I'm just going to read right before the 16th chapter. Away with him. Away with him. Crucify him. What? Crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar. The leading priests shouted back. Then Pilate turned Jesus. This is where we pick up our lesson. Over to them to be crucified. Verse 16 continues to read, so they took Jesus away, verse 17, carrying the cross by himself. This is what John says. Matthew says that Simeon carried the cross, and when he carried the cross, it was the crossbar. He went to a place called the place of the skulls in Hebrew, which is Golgotha. There they nailed him to the cross. 2 others were crucified with him, one on either side, with Jesus between them. And Pilate posted a sign on the cross that read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Now, they sort of argued about this, and the religious leader says, no, take that down, rewrite that, say he claimed to be the King of the Jews. And Pilate said, it is what it is, and that's what it's going to be. Picking up on the verse 20th, the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, so that many people could read it. And I liked, no, I'll keep reading. Then the leading priests objected and said to Pilate, change it from the King of the Jews to he said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate replied, no, what I have written, I have written. When the soldiers had Jesus crucified, they divided his clothes among the 4 of them. They also took his robe, but it was seamless, woven, in one piece from top to bottom. So they said, rather than tearing it, let's throw dice for it. And this fulfilled the scripture. So I'm going to stop right here. And it was customary, it was Roman law that the soldiers executing the crucifixion could have the clothes of the guilty party. And so this is what we're learning in this lesson. And this is why the soldiers were gambling. But they would typically share the garment. But in this particular case, Jesus had an expensive garment, because typically, and I don't want to go into all the details, but I did kind of did a little deep dive into his garments, because I remember my dad preaching about Jesus's garment and how it was pricey, it was expensive. And that particular Sunday when he was preaching, anytime you talk about fashion, I'm going to perk up. And so it was woven, instead of being 2 pieces sewn on the side, it was woven all the way down. It was more expensive and more valuable than the typical garment. And so they didn't want to rip it. And so they threw dice to see who would get it. And they divided the garments among themselves and threw dice for my clothing. This was fulfilled in the scriptures. So that is what they did. And so we're picking up in the 25th verse. Standing near the cross were Jesus' mother. Yeah, so this is kind of a highlighted part of our lesson. If we break the lesson down here, when at the crucifixion, family and friends could come, and the mother was always allowed to come. And so Jesus was, he was not too high. He was lifted up on the cross, but he was not too high that they could not hear him when he spoke. And at this particular time, Jesus is getting ready to release his mother into the hands of his disciple John. This was customary. It was customary that the eldest son, who was responsible for the mother, because women at that time, especially widows, women didn't earn an income. And so their sons, if their husbands or their sons, would take care of them. And so let's just see what happens. Standing near the cross were Jesus' mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple he loved, he said to her, "Dear woman, here is your son." And he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from then on, the disciple took her into his home. And so now we understand what happened here. At that particular time, Mary would have been in her 40s. And so we know the commandment, honor thy mother and thy father. And a part of this honoring is that you took care of, you provided for them. And so at this particular time, Mary was probably a widow and didn't earn income. And so even though Jesus had brothers, he left the responsibility of his mother to the disciple John. And this was an honor. It was an honor to be included. As Jesus was a rabbi, John was a disciple, and it was an honor to be a part of or included into the rabbi's family. And so this is a way of Jesus honoring John and handing his mother over to him. Let's read on as we wrap up. Verse 28, Jesus knew that his mission was now finished, and he fulfilled the scripture. He said, "I am thirsty." A jar of sour wine was sitting there. So they soaked a sponge in it and put on a hyssop branch and held it to his lips. When Jesus tasted it, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and he released his spirit. And actually, Matthew said that Jesus tasted it but didn't want it. And so we sing these songs. There's one more before I wrap up the lesson. There's one more point I want to make. We sing this song that Jesus was pierced in the side, and John doesn't mention it. However, it is a Roman custom for the Roman soldiers to pierce individuals that are being crucified, just to determine whether or not they are dead, and some other things that they would do as well to determine whether or not they were dead, or to speed up. They would break the leg to speed up the process of death. And so that is, let's see what the aim of our lesson is. I know we'll learn more next week. Don't know why I closed my book here. Bear with me. Okay, here we go. So let's see what the aim of the lesson is. The aim of the lesson is to study John's account. Okay, I studied John's account, but I added a little Matthew in there. Of the crucifixion of Jesus, the King of the Jews. The principle is to become wholly assured that Jesus died on the cross to take away the sins of the world. That's John 1:29. The application is to determine to live in victory over sin because of Christ's death to set us free. Next week's lesson will study one of the appearances of Jesus that Jesus made to his disciple after his resurrection. So let's just read the conclusion as we wrap it up. It is finished. It may not have seemed like it at the time, but it was a shout of victory. Jesus' mission was complete, and sin had been fully and finally atoned for. But how can a man shout in victory with his last words? The reason is simple. Jesus knew that he would be resurrected 3 days later, never to die again. And I want to encourage you to read Matthew's version, because Matthew's version talk about how when Jesus was on the cross, people walked by and mocked him, and I just, for me, I thought about, okay, I wonder when they died. Did they realize, those who walked by and mocked him, and those who even crucified him when they died, and they saw, if they, well, I'm sure they didn't see Jesus, but I know they realized once they left, once they died, that Jesus was Lord. Well, that ends our lesson. It's been extremely exciting to share this with you. Until next week, have a wonderful week.